There's been a lot of debate lately about Victoria's respectful relations curriculum, especially around how it discusses gender and identity with students. One of the strongest critics has been Rikkie-Lee Tyrrell, member for the Northern Victorian region. She's argued that schools should only teach that there are two genders, male and female, and that anything beyond that has no place in the classroom. Rikkie-Lee, let's start with what the Victoria respectful relationship is exactly and what you're taking umbrage to.
My problem with it is teaching it to such a young age. Like, they're looking at 5-year-olds and targeting 5-year-olds for this. I think it's really unacceptable. Look, 5-year-olds are still learning your basic language skills and arithmetic, and they're not ready to take on such a large, complex responsibility in that kind of thought.
You've said that there are only two genders, male and female. Can you explain why you hold that view so strongly?
Look, biologically, that's exactly how it is. We have very rare circumstances where we do have hermaphrodites, but that should be between the parents and medical professionals. That shouldn't come into the classroom until they've dealt with all of that. And look, it's a very, very minute group of people that have that. It's very rare. So
it's actually, I believe, 1.7% of people have some sort of intersex condition.
Yep. But still, you've got 98.4% that still don't. So, and 5-year-olds, that's what I'm getting at, is such a young age group. Like, between the ages of 5 and 12, they are primary school age children. They should be focusing on the basics, like reading, writing, arithmetic. We need to develop and grow those basic skills to get our kids ready for the real world, because the real world is much more harder than it was, say, 30 or 40 years ago. Our workforce, it's a bloodbath to try to get a job because we're seeing 1,500 immigrants.
All right, well, we're not talking about workforces or adults at the moment. We're talking about the children. You know, as you said, you think this is too early for children. So you think that learning about different binaries, gay, non-binary, and those sort of issues at 4 is too young? The children cannot handle that?
Yes, I do. I've got 2 children myself, and that's far too complex for them at that age.
Well, the facts are apparently that this is not true. Long-standing evidence is clear that children develop their understanding of gender from a young age, and that by the age of 4, they largely adhere to gender norms. This is developmentally appropriate, and this initiative is not seeking to make children gay, non-binary, or trans.
Okay, but how much time are they spending teaching the children this in school?
Well, I imagine it's quite... I'm not a teacher myself. I'd love to hear from teachers. If you are a teacher, please SMS 0467842722. I can't imagine they're spending weeks and hours talking about it. It's probably one of those things, particularly at that age, that's just passed on in brief comment and then is developed in sex education classes a little bit older.
Yeah, look, as they get older, then yes, but 5-year-olds, 4 and 5-year-olds, no, I think they should really be focusing on the basics like reading, writing and arithmetic, because at the moment, our students are lagging in their education. When my daughter started Year 7 a couple of years ago, first parent-teacher interview, they're like, oh, the spelling and all's at a Year 2 level. And I'm like, oh my goodness, really? And the teacher did say, oh no, don't worry, that's the entire year. We're seeing the entire grade 7 at that reading level. And that was very alarming. I think they should really be focusing more on the academics at school.
So I don't think that talking about gender identities would be removing the curriculum on reading and writing. What age are you okay with students learning about other gender identities?
Look, in high school, when they're starting puberty, and when they're starting, really entering adolescence, I think that would be a good age.
What about talking about how children are made and that sort of biology?
Yeah, look, that's good. They generally start that Year 5, Year 6.
So wouldn't this gender identity fall into the same sort of category?
No, I think you start at the basics. You start at the basics at Year 5 and 6, but then you you go into the more complex, like the gender diversity, when they're in high school.
From VicGov, they
That's
say
my
the
opinion.
fact for younger children, consent education includes an age-appropriate focus on what it can look or sound like to ask for permission or consent, to refuse permission or consent, and to understand that consent can be obtained by pressuring people to do something they don't want to do. For example, giving or denying permission to borrow a pencil. So all of this comes under I guess a bit of respect and understanding of other people there. The program's main focus is about family violence, and that's the main aim.
Okay. Yeah, well, with 5-year-olds, though, we'll go back to the 5-year-olds. In my experience, they're completely accepting and trusting of everybody that they meet. We have to instill in them stranger danger because they're so trusting. So I don't see why the government's so focused on thinking that 5-year-olds are going to reject a child because of their sexual identity or how they look. So I'm not sure why the government is so, that they're wanting to do that so early in life, because they are very accepting of people regardless.
You've said that you believe that the majority of Victorians share your view. What evidence are you basing on that, and what are the actual numbers?
Oh, look, speaking to all my constituents that have kids in this age group, I'm in that parenting community. I've got a child still at primary school myself, and I also have a child in high school. So I do talk to a lot of parents and a lot of constituents. When we get onto the topic of education, they're like, we need to stop focusing on political ideologies. Sorry about that. And we really do want our kids...
But aren't saying there are only two genders, isn't that also an agenda?
No, it's a biological fact.
Well, there's not there. We do know that there intersex people do exist.
Yes.
So are you saying they don't?
Minority.
But so which is it, that there's only two genders, or that intersex people do also exist? It can't be both.
It can't. Well, I can say that. Well, then yes, there is that very small minority. But
okay, so there is definitely a need then for understanding and compassion about other cultures. Would you feel that would be a fair statement?
Yeah, we have that. But I'm saying the vast majority in the public schooling system of our, people, they want to be focusing more on the academics.
Yeah, once again, do you feel that talking about this is removing away from time about academics?
Yes, I think there's too much focus on it at the moment. I think that the really important issue that we're not facing is that our Victorian schooling system is failing our children in preparing them to become well-grounded adults, academically ready for the real world.
So on that, would you think that perhaps all discussions on religion, gender, anything else should also be removed?
No, a lot of discussions on religion are voluntary, so parents have... We have forms and that we can sign and say whether our children are taught scripture or religion at school, and I think this should be the same circumstance.
But still within school time, that would be okay with you if some parents agreed to...
If parents agree to it, fine, but the power needs to go back into the parents' hands of what they're exposing their children to. So it should be up to the parents. So look, if the government wants to put this in schools, that's fine, but it should be a voluntary system, not compulsory.
I'd love to know what the listeners are thinking. 0467 842 722. Frank writes, "Hi Ben, in biology there are occasional genetic cases where a birth occurs which isn't one of the two genders, XXY or even XXYY. These are rare but do exist, so clearly there are cases where there is something more than two genders. As for people wishing to be regarded as another gender, it is difficult undertaking, so shouldn't be approached flippantly. However, if someone feels strongly about it, I can't see why it shouldn't be allowed. We aren't talking large numbers at any rate, so I see it as a live and let live. As for children, it is often very difficult to hide information from them, so why bother?" Do you have any thoughts on that, Rikkie?
No, look, I completely agree with him, and it's true, kids do know. And
so isn't it, if they do know, is it better to perhaps help them educate and give them the actual facts?
Yeah, look, if they're curious and they ask, up to the parents of whether the parents want them exposed to that at such a young age. But yeah, I completely agree with that statement that he's made.
On another note, in Stawell, and I understand previously here in Mildura, there is a billboard for One Nation that says high immigration equals rental crisis. What is that based on?
Look, we do have a rental crisis because there are so many people coming into this country. Like I said earlier, we're having over 1,500 people arrive daily in Australia, and it is impacting our housing.
It's interesting, though, that because the signs are in Stawell and Mildura, the two that we've been aware of. In those particular communities, immigrants are an asset to those communities like Stawell, who work heavily in the abattoirs, farmers and more. So actually help those industries and business thrive. So why did you choose those as the placements for those?
Look, I didn't choose that sign. And when it went up, I had a word to them as well, who was responsible. I'm like, are you serious? I said, the economy there relies heavily on immigrant workers for the agricultural industries there. So had it been up to me, that sign wouldn't have been there with that wording. That's for sure.
Do you think it maybe needs an asterisk so that only in certain areas or something like that you feel it adds to the rental crisis?
Yeah. Look, I think that sign needs to be removed and something more suitable for the region needs to be put up. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate that, Rikkie-Lee Tyrrell.